Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale a business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Fernando Ribeiro, the founder and CEO of Alinea Health. Fernando, welcome to the show.
Mike, thanks for having me.
It's really a pleasure. And as the crowd will see and the community will see, there is a lot of lessons learned here on your path and on your previous paths as well. And I'm looking forward to getting to know more about you and your journey. And of course, sharing it with the community so we can all benefit from the lessons learned of each other. Always learning, right? With a learner mindset. So who is Fernando? And let us know more also, how did you decide to start Alinea Health? And later we will discuss more about Alinea Health. But let's start with you, of course.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm originally from São Paulo, Brazil. I went to law school here, but never practiced. So started in finance, investment banking, and private equity in São Paulo, New York. But I come from a family of doctors and entrepreneurs and always had that entrepreneurial itch. And in 2014, joined an early stage startup in São Paulo. And, very different times than today. We joined the company. We had 10 or so people, essentially pre-operational, and went through, like an incredible cycle of, bringing in an incredible team of investors and then growing the company. I was there for close to 3 years. And over that time, we went from 10 or so people to over 100 employees, and being a part of that journey was incredible. Then left to go to business school and worked at Amazon as a senior product manager on the Alexa team, and then joined Bridgewater Associates, which is the common theme there is like these very strong cultures, and then returned to Brazil. And since then, we've been in this completely obsessive love-hate relationship with healthcare. And I know, Mike, that you're passionate about this as well. So I know that you understand how easy it is to fall in love with the purpose of dedicating your life to healthcare, but also how frustrating sometimes reality and the status quo can be. And just by personal connection to healthcare in general. So as I mentioned, I come from a family of doctors and entrepreneurs. And my great grandfather, he was one of the founding members of the medical licensing board here in Brazil, and his medical ID is actually number 13, which is pretty wild to think that so recently we've actually started a medical licensing board in Brazil. And fast forward to today, Brazil hasn't really evolved much on quality, right? So Brazil is still on the bottom of the quality rankings in the World Health Organization. We have massive problems with access. Over 160 million people want but can't have access to private healthcare in Brazil. And it's a very, unfortunately, broken system that impacts people every day. And I, unfortunately, have had experiences myself. My wife almost died from a misdiagnosis. And these are things that unfortunately happen a lot more often than people understand. So, very excited to be here and share a little bit more about Alinea as well.
That's great. This week we have released the podcast with Vidya, Tiago, which is kind of also helping with the surgery component for the ones who don't have a health plan. And we keep going with healthtech. Of course, this episode will not be released in the same week. So for the ones who are listening, to not be confused, but definitely we are covering more and more Brazil and what are the needs of the healthcare system, and I'm really excited to know more. And that's when you came out with the idea for Alinea Health, and there is a lot, as I said, there is a lot of opportunities in the health tech system or in the healthcare ecosystem in Brazil, which brings a lot of opportunities for health tech companies to solve those big problems. And let us know more about why Alinea Health and what you are doing.
Yeah. So just taking even a couple of steps back and just offering some context to some of the viewers who might not be familiar with Brazilian healthcare. But here in Brazil, we have over 210 million people, and 50 million have access to private healthcare plans. And if you ask the other 160 million people, what are the things that they most want? Private healthcare plans are amongst the top 3 good or services most desired by Brazilians. And the number one reason why they don't have it is because it's expensive. And here in Brazil, it's very expensive. And every year it only gets more expensive, roughly 17% hikes every year. So it's something that people absolutely crave and they can't access. And once we start peeling the layers and trying to really understand, diagnose what the root cause of the issue is, unfortunately, it's the service that the model that we have, the incentives of fee for service. And I know this is a common theme shared in the US as well. But here in Brazil, providers are essentially paid for volume. So every time they do a new service, a surgery, a procedure, that's the incentive. And unfortunately, when you have that kind of incentives in place, you generate waste and fraud. And this is a $3 trillion problem in the US. And unfortunately, Brazil shares this as well. And here it's just mind-blowing. It's up 20 to 40% of total healthcare spend is waste and fraud. Wow. And what essentially Alinea is offering is, so we work with it's care coordination and care navigation. So we work with employers that offer private healthcare plans to their employees, and we help their employees navigate through their healthcare journeys. Essentially, through 2 main components. One is virtual primary care. So unlike in the US, most folks have a family doctor, someone who actually takes care of them throughout their journeys. Here in Brazil, most Brazilians don't have that kind of close proximity to a physician. So we're actually trying to connect the dots here and have a holistic view of people and helping them navigate through their healthcare journeys. And the second big bucket is in navigation. So every time somebody needs to use their private healthcare plans, here in Brazil, they're abandoned. They have to sort of fend for themselves. And there's very little information or transparency or even convenience in navigating that journey. And Alinea essentially brings this almost concierge-like experience where every time they need to use their healthcare plan, they can access our team or our platform, and we'll either recommend what the best physician is within their network, help them by actually executing the scheduling and follow-up, et cetera. So it's really trying to, I think, bring the convenience that we have in almost every other aspect of our lives. You can order an Uber with 2 clicks, but here in Brazil, if you want to find, who's the most appropriate physician for you and actually schedule that, that's a massive undertaking, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I can see the problem as an autoimmune warrior. It's definitely difficult to understand who should we go to and who is able to combine all the pieces together and provide us an healthcare journey. So definitely super well needed, and sometimes the insurance also on that side, of course, they are doing their job. When you are a little bit desperate about your own health situation, they will ask you, why are you doing these lab tests, etc., etc. So really having someone who is taking care of that journey, I think that helps also the insurance side to, of course, avoid the fraud that is a massive problem that you were talking about, and to not affect the ones who are not trying to make frauds, but who are really trying to get better, as you said. So definitely it's good to try to balance and cover the 2 sides of the coin, and improving the experience of the patient, and at the same time making the system more effective and sustainable, because that's one of the issues, right? So nobody is happy nowadays with the health insurance, because the insurers are not having a lot of margin, and the patients are not having the value that they want out of the service, and you guys are aligning the incentives of both parties, right? And also
exactly.
of course, through the company or through the employer side, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. I think in life, probably the biggest asymmetry of information is between patient and doctor. There's just a massive gap there. And having an independent, impartial third party who can help you navigate through that journey is absolutely critical, especially when we're talking about something that's so important like your healthcare. You have a major life decision to make, and sometimes you're given one prognosis, and you're sort of left to decide things with very little, either triangulation or a second opinion, etc. So we're really trying to close that gap and then offer that kind of support and convenience throughout the journey. And to your point, when we look at healthcare in Brazil, the two parts that are very critical in this equation, which are the employers who pay for the bill and the employees who are getting some, oftentimes unnecessary or harmful procedures, are the most abandoned in the equation. So we're trying to step in and really, be partners to these two, critical parts of the equation. So we want to elevate the quality of healthcare for the members, and we want to reduce costs to employers, essentially through quality. So when when we're actually delivering, the appropriate care at the right time with the right physician, we're elevating quality significantly, and we're avoiding the 20 to 40% of waste and fraud, which is again helpful for the employers. So that is our mission. Our mantra is to reduce costs through by elevating the quality of healthcare in Brazil.
Much better explained. Thanks for clarifying. And it is incredible because you have started the company, at least officially, kind of 1 year ago, and it seems for the clarity and the confidence that you talk about the idea and what you are doing, that you have started almost 3 or 4 years ago, at least. I know that we will discuss that later a bit on the fundraising bit. You also have a benchmark in the US. One of the leaders of those benchmarks are also your investors, and business angels, which helps a lot to get already into another stage, another understanding of the market, another experience. And at the same time, of course, you bring the understanding of your ecosystem as you are Brazilian, and you understand both the US and Brazil, as you have been living in both countries. Did that help in terms of ensuring that you were much faster kind of executing and bringing the idea or trying to solve the problem in Brazil much faster than the typical life cycle of an early stage company?
I think what really accelerated, I think, our learning curve was the team that we put together. So my co-founder Will is one of the most phenomenal people I've ever met, and together, very systematic in our approach. So we always start with that hypothesis, and then we're clearly going after validation. So our big question, number one question was feasibility at first. So hey, we know that in the US, people have been able to leverage data in a way to essentially to solve this problem, right? Hey, how can we leverage data to have a deeper understanding of providers, a deeper understanding of patients, and elevate quality and reduce costs? And that's been done in the US and here in Brazil, unfortunately, just basically no progress. It's really been surprising. So we started off with that basic question of feasibility, and then went through the motions of, hey, what's the quality of the data? What can we do, etc. Then after building that confidence, going after the second big question of desirability. Hey, what's the kind of reception that we'll see in companies? And then we were just blown away. I've never been in situations where it's an inverted pitch situation. We could step into a company and then they start selling to us, and then that was for us just really mind blowing. Saying, wow, this is truly critical. And after talking to literally everyone in every major vertical in healthcare in Brazil, just being blown away by how, unfortunately, penetration in tech in Brazilian healthcare has been just very, very low. There's just a lot of opportunity to apply, sometimes even basic kind of a data science into this journey, and having massive impact. So after going through that, those loops and building that level of confidence, that's when we decided to, hey, now let's really beef up our team, bringing in incredible investors. And I honestly think that we have the best investors to help us in executing this vision. So we brought in Founders Fund, who, just a phenomenal firm, but above all, they also have a deep understanding of the problem that we're solving. And General Catalyst, another truly world-class team, who also invest in our US benchmarks. And you also alluded to this. We also brought in Glenn Tolman, who is former CEO and founder of Livongo, probably one of the people who most understands digital health in the world, and also into our team. So I think we really put together this incredible team of investors and employees who are just all share that twinkle in their eye of reshaping Brazilian healthcare.
That's really impressive, and definitely the strategy of ensuring that you have the right people around you to ensure that you are able to execute and really have an impact with the venture. So that's definitely super inspiring. And you have also been not only as an executive in a Scaleup in São Paulo before, but you have also been in the US with Amazon and Bridgewater. Did you have any influence in terms of company building that came from those cultures in the US? If I'm not sure, you have been in Seattle at Amazon, in Bridgewater, New York, or in
Bridgewater, yeah, it's in Connecticut. I was living in New York. And yeah, absolutely. And those are actually, the cultural component is actually the main driver that pulled me towards both of these companies. And both are significant influences in the culture that we're building at Alinea, and that's almost as important as our purpose as well. Is what kind of environment and culture are we building at Alinea? And definitely was inspired by, for example, Amazon's just customer-centric culture. It's phenomenal. I mean, I remember going to meetings and seeing very senior leaders opening up the 70th page of of a presentation to look through the flow of what the customer journey actually looks like. Hey, what screens are they looking at? At that level of granularity, truly caring about the user experience. And at Bridgewater, it's there's another big component, big influence in the culture that we're building as well, just transparency. Ray Dalio's, very famous for building that, concept of idea meritocracy and radical transparency. And that's something that for me, just resonates very close to my heart personally, and Will's, my co-founder as well. Essentially, we understand transparency at these two levels. One is giving transparency to all employees about everything. And second is interpersonal transparency. So it's being truthful with one another and giving constant feedback and offering that sense of community where everybody wants to help and develop everybody else. This is that's easier said than done, and we really have a team of people who really share that spirit.
Definitely recommends the Ray Dalio's Mystic book, The Principles. And of course, if you are a little bit lazier or you are too busy, there you can also watch some YouTube talks from Ray Dalio, where it kind of summarizes all the content of the book. And there is also a last one that I've also read something about, where he talks about the future geopolitical forces in the future, right? So yeah, super good. Okay, perfect. And before moving into the fundraising lessons, that's one of the classics and one of the stuff that people love to get to know more about. How do you see this recent nuclear winter out there, especially in the US? We keep seeing that, for instance, Europe and Southeast Asia keep moving strong in terms of rounds. There is also always this discussion that maybe some of the rounds were already closed, so they are just being announced now. So there are some questions about if if we are having a downturn or not. What we are seeing is, of course, there is an impact in terms of term sheets, according to what founders are sharing across informal networks that we have. What's your position on this? What is your view on this? What are some of the tips that you'd like to share with founders and these executives that are listening to us?
Yeah, I mean, it's these are definitely very crazy times, and even in the spirit of transparency, that's something that we discuss in the company, very openly. Like what's our situation and what's our what's our views on the market in general. But I think there are a couple of things here, right? First is where we were 3 months ago versus where we are now. 3 months ago, I think we, was this free fall, and people didn't know, like where the end of the pit lied. I think now we basically have, more confidence on that. And I do expect a rebound, potentially not at the same levels of where we were before. But I just, starting with just the outlook, I think, things are now, actually going to trend in a different direction. And then second, it's, like looking at the impact on LATAM and at Alinea specifically as well.
Yeah.
I think that, it's definitely going to be something that will be very positive for a group of companies and very negative for others. Alinea was, like from the get-go, we are very focused on fundamentals. I mean, we have to, we have to solve problems that are, hair on fire problems, and that people have, like just desperate need to solve. And there's nothing more critical than, than healthcare. So for us, our focus of, actually going after, like a true pain point and, building an actual business. So with solid fundamentals, economics, et cetera, is something that even, like, I think, when we talk to some investors, they were more of, like they were trying to guide us towards the direction of, hey, hyper growth. And I think at this, like this new conjecture here of the world, I think premiums are going to basically shift from hypergrowth to fundamentals, solid unit economics, and I think a lot of companies who are just excellent at fundraising and not necessarily very good at executing are definitely going to be penalized. And I think in this environment we're very comfortable. Not only do we have a solid balance sheet to like go through this nuclear winter. But secondly, we, the entire strategy team has been focused on, like this more fundamental view of solving true problems in scalable ways. And so I think we're pretty well positioned in this context.
Right. And what is the head count of Alinea at this stage, just for the listeners to get an understanding?
Yeah, so we started the year off basically with me, my co-founder, and one more analyst, and now we're at 30. Awesome. And we continue to grow. Well then,
and and this is the moment that it would be also great to go through your journey with Alinea, also in terms of fundraising. So when did it happen? Your pre-seed angel rounds and later or already this year, kind of 4 months ago or in February, you announced your 20 million reais, almost $4 million seed round, as you said, with being the first investment that Founders Fund led in a health tech company in LATAM or Brazil, both.
Yeah, I think in both. Yeah, it was we were really honored also to put together this great team. But just quick story. So we started. We started with a small pre-seed round with people who we thought were just exceptional angels who could take us to the next level. And that included Latitude Fund. So Brian Reckworth, who I think is probably joining you soon here on the podcast, who's phenomenal. And leaders in every major vertical in Brazilian healthcare. So in diagnostics, hospitals, etc. We put together this team of truly exceptional people who really understand the Brazilian dynamic. And from that moment, we were basically following that execution plan that I described earlier. And once we built confidence that, yes, we not only, this is, feasible, we actually have, just tremendous desirability here from employers and employees. that's when we actually went out and looked for the ideal group of investors, and found that in Founders Fund, General Catalyst, and our group of investors also includes Nocti Ventures, amongst others. And then since then, we've just been really executing and growing. Now we don't have we have a very we have years of cash burn, so we're not really looking to fundraise at this point. And even just considering our current cap, we have Founders Fund and General Catalyst are both multi-stage investors who could just between them probably take us to IPO and beyond. So I think we have a truly exceptional team of investors with us.
Right. And yes, and there is still the option even in the region to maybe have Kazakh joining on board, or Valor. And I'm missing another very well known. What is the top three? Valor, Kazakh. I'm missing one of them.
Yeah, Monashis. They're
yes.
a few very big.
Of course, yeah. But it's interesting that you went also to be able to attract, as you said, very large investors that can go through multiple stages. And I would say this is also one of the discussions, especially for the smaller pre-seed funds. They would say, maybe you should be backed by us because we are able to help you much more. And maybe those funds make a lot of bets. Maybe they will not follow on those investments, and then it will be difficult for you as a founder. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think for us, I think there's it's hard for you to have generic advice. I think it's always contextual, and in our context, I think both Founders Fund and General Catalyst, they hold a very high bar in which teams they decide to back. Precisely to your point, because they don't want to have conflicting investments. So having them on board is not having them at this stage; it's having them for the long run, and that's something that we've focused from day one. Is who are long-term investors who understand, who have a deep understanding of the problem that we're tackling. So both Founders Fund and General Catalyst, they invest in our US benchmarks, but also hold this long-term vision. People who understand that, in healthcare in general, these are longer cycles, and who are partnering with us, throughout the journey, and willing and want to add value, during this process. So, there's no objection to funds who, pre-seed funds. I think, there's several that are tremendous in really helping companies go from, 0 to 1. And in our case, we built a roster that was also composed, that also had that flavor, be it in Nocti Ventures, etc.
Right. I don't want to, of course, make questions that make you uncomfortable, and of course, it's also always a sensitive topic to talk about investor. But something that I think that's lessons that founders can extract from our conversation and learn from our conversation is the strategic way that you look into fundraising, trying to associate yourself with people that could really help to execute and who understand the space, and at the same time, something that I really enjoyed that you were talking about, that are committed with the founding team for the long term, and that have a history of helping the founding teams along different cycles of the venture, and who are committed to help, and of course who have also interesting networks in the same field. Any other tip or any other lesson learned that you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important to do your due diligence. So even for us, Founders Fund is a tremendous firm, just known worldwide. But still, I reached out to several CEO founders from their portfolio companies to have a deeper understanding of, hey, what is it really like, and what is it really like when things are great and when things are terrible. And it was great because not only did I learn a ton about not only our current investors but other potential investors who we didn't bring in during in our last round. We also just built incredible relationships. These are people that I keep in touch with, to this day. And also have, I think one tip I'll give folks as well is understanding that, it always depends on the people you're working with. So even within a firm, they'll have a specific kind of ethos, but the big difference is who are you working with within that firm? Because, somebody might give you, a reference on what it's like to work with firm X, but they work with a completely different team, a completely different partner, and then it's a different dynamic. So definitely have a deeper understanding of, who are the actual focal points in those people that you're working on a day-to-day basis, and then building that kind of confidence too.
Right. And I think it's really important to have those strong business angels very early on backing you. Any tips there? Because I think that we don't discuss a lot on this on the shows. We talk a lot about VCs, but I think it's super important. I think that you have done that very well. Any tips there in order to map the kind of the dream list of business angels that you like? Because I think it's also a different mindset, right? So when we start thinking about our dream list of investors, so the ones we would love to work with because we think that they are able to help and that we will have a fit. Of course, then we need to develop the relationships for the majority of the founders, unless you are a serial entrepreneur that you have worked with your investors several times in different ventures. But I think this is still maybe at least less than 50% of the cases. I think it will get more and more common that you will be backed by investors that you have worked in the past, and we are seeing as the ecosystem matures more and more. But still, I think that there is an overwhelming quantity of information for a founder CEO who is starting out. They need to understand what they should do in the pre-seed stage, what they should do in the seed stage. They need to be a little bit ahead of time. How do I build a founding team? What will be my first hires? What looks like my vision in the long term, the midterm, the short term? What will be the role of technology to solve this problem? What is the size of the market? What will be the roadmap? What will be my fundraising strategy? How do I execute that? How do I keep everyone on there is a lot of questions, a lot of stuff to do early on, that it would be difficult to take a lot of time to just go through the competitive landscape, understanding what are the angels that might help us, what are our dream list of investors. So in theory, as I said, we know what we need to do. Sometimes we don't know. It's true that's why we do what we do. But sometimes we know what we need to do, but it's difficult also to execute. And any tips there on the business angel kind of strategy of putting together those business angels? Sorry for
I think you actually you articulated most of the key questions very well, and I think as a function of that first I think it's just operating at the objective level, right? So it's hey, what's our goal, and in that goal start to break down what are some of the major risks or questions that we'll have or challenges that we'll face in the short and medium term. And then, who are the ideal people to back in each of these buckets of, potential risk, et cetera. So I think, at least in our read, there were a few components that were, for example, data related. So, hey, what's the ideal group of people that will want to back us in this component? There's another group that's just specific to the industry. So then, we also mapped out who are the ideal people we want to have to help us in this front. And there's a last component too of just company building and stage financing. So, hey, let's bring in other exceptional, CEO founders of unicorn companies. And in that sense, we brought in Brian Reckworth, some folks who are happy and, people who have experience and are believable in, not only growing from 0 to 1, but also going from 1 to 1,000. And having these people, in your corner as well, people who you can, talk to when you're going through these different, specific challenges is just, it was, at least in our view, critical in building that kind of relationship soon. And answering your question, it's a bit of, looking ahead, breaking, distilling that into a few buckets of, key types of angels that you'd like to have, and then going after these folks. And the other thing I just say too is chemistry, I think, is very important. having people just to slap their name on there isn't it isn't going to solve that problem. So for us, I mean, like we would talk to people, but it was also like every time we were talking to a new potential angel, etc. It's really understanding to what extent first does this person share our vision. Second, there's an actual connection. And third, share that also long-term commitment of, hey, we want to build something that is going to reshape healthcare. It's going to take this. We're going through this route, and people who share that vision. So these are sometimes the people who you put on like that dream list might not check all those boxes.
Right.
And I think it's better to have fewer people who you share that connection with than necessarily have just a massive captivity.
That's a good point there, especially in early stages. You don't have the time to speak to too many people because you are really, really busy, and it's not about being arrogant, because you would love to have that time to speak with more people and to get more feedback and to learn more from them. But it's better to have those core people who are able to go through and maybe that are able to answer 80 or 90% of the questions that you have anyway. It's not that you are not having the answers and the experience. Again, at the end of the day, that's our take, that's our decision. But at least we have the option to ask for people who have been there, done that before, and who also are a little bit more impartial and have an outside perspective, but have been insiders in their own companies to share advice. And second, that I'd like to share here is sometimes not, as you said, starting the relationship, understanding that if you would be a good fit or not, and maybe start by inviting them to share some advice with you. And a lot of those people, if they connect with the problem and if they also like you, they'll be more than happy to help without any compensation. So sometimes just being part of an informal advisory board, even for them, they are not interested in having the formality of the title. Later on, it would be also a benefit from them or an honor for them to be able to be a business angel and to invest in the venture and to have access to the investment. So it's kind of a different frame. Instead of just catching people, it's about nurturing those relationships and really finding out if they are a fit, like we are getting to know investors and seeing, is this interesting for both of us to work together? Is this a problem that fits your investment thesis? Would you also fit my venture thesis, let's say, in another way, and dating and getting to know each other? Super interesting points.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree with the try before you buy. And, that's something that, we also do all the time. I mean, when we talk to new investors and, like we have something that they could potentially, help us with, we'll ask them, hey, could you help us with this or make this intro? And, it's just a night and day. I mean, there's folks who, even if, like we're talking about a Series A and, more than 12 months from now, folks will help now. And it's not everybody who's like that, but it gives you a sense of, okay, if this person were actually here, and participating in building this company, it's the expectation of, like what kind of value you can build together is just much, much greater.
Something that is really also difficult for a founder, and we were talking about this briefly before, it's to have clarity about the vision, about the long term, and also understanding being able to execute in the short term, but not forgetting the midterm. And I think that, again, as you were saying, sometimes we need to be working in the next quarter, in the next 18 months, what we need to prove in the next round, and at the same time to keep everyone understanding why are we doing what we are doing and who would like to become when we are adults and in the long term. So those ventures are kind of childs or babies that are starting up. So what's next for Alinea Health on your minds, and what you need to prove in order to get to a successful A round?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a balancing act of everything you just mentioned. And, for us, I mean, like our approach is always, it's just very obsessive about the problem and very agnostic in regard to the solution and the path. So, like for us, the focus, and it always has to be on, the pain points. So both at the company level and at the employees. And as a function of that, we are, we've been very successful in executing our current strategy. And we have a pipeline of more companies to onboard, which, we're phasing into. So it's, a great problem to have. Excellent. But for us, as we're looking over, the next 12 months, our focus is to continue to deliver an incredible experience to our members, and to increasingly, by improving quality, reducing costs to our employers. And that's our focus for the next year, and it's really just scaling and iterating on this path. And once we hit that, then we'll we'll really look into scale, and that's when we'll raise our Series A, and then really pumping in more gasoline into the tank once we've closed this next cycle.
So still those kind of the NPS, patient outcomes, and both NPS for the employee and for the employer, and of course those critical metrics of you were talking about. You might know, of course, what are the critical metrics, but it might be something related to the cost for the employer, and the quality of service to the employees, and of course it is also the quality for the employer in terms of managing the health plan is also important in a certain way. But those are kind of I would say the most important metrics before you start to think about scaling up post Series A, or raising the A round to be able, as you said, to put the metal in the pedal and start scaling up more aggressively.
Absolutely, yeah. The two main components here is are we driving great engagement and driving a great experience? And in that sense, I think we've cool. We're in such a great timing, sort of great / unfortunate, right? Because Brazil is just now creeping out of the pandemic, and recently we were actually lifting the COVID restrictions that we're having here. So basically we have 2 years worth of pent-up demand. So people have been basically, we have 2 years worth of, checkups to do, etc. So, engagements have been just off the chart for us. We've been able to add tremendous value to people, from day one, and, sustaining this. So really focusing on engagement and, delivering an incredible experience to employees. And on the employer side is, translating this experience into increasingly more cost reduction.
Love it. Super clear. And so that's the moment where we get into that segment of the show where we ask to our guests a quick question, and they give us a quick answer. Are you ready, Fernando, for the last segment?
Sure, let's go. Let's do it.
Okay, so if you'd have the opportunity to meet yourself or have a coffee with your younger self at the beginning of Alinea Health, what advice would you offer to your younger self?
So I think one of them is holding a higher bar for believability. This is actually just it's a page from Ray Dalio's principles, actually. But I think when we're making a decision that we've never done before, we go after and triangulate with other people, and oftentimes we assume that someone's believable in a certain subject because they hold a certain title. And I think it's very important to sort of demystify this and have a clear understanding of what makes somebody believable in a certain topic. And Ray's principles, basically, if somebody has done that successfully more than 3 times and understand the cause and effect linkages that led to their success, it's a significantly high bar. And if you do that, you truly mitigate the risk when you're incorporating this kind of feedback. That's something I'd reiterate.
Love it. What are you the most proud of on your journey so far?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's been the team that we've assembled so far at Alinea. It's when we're looking at just the talent pool in general. And we're looking at a group of exceptional people, which is obviously like a smaller group. And then we're looking at people who share this, vision, purpose, and culture of radical transparency, etc. So it's such a small universe. And the fact that we've been able to, find these, already 30 people who are, check every one of these boxes, something that I'm really, really proud of.
Some worst advice ever received?
Yeah, so going back to the growth over fundamentals, I think there's a ton of people who are, hey, just start raising without, having a clear path of what you want to do, or hey, just pump all your capital into growing and, leave the fundamentals to a Series A or Series B. These all sound like, crazy advice. Sounds like crazy advice at this point. But these were, things that serious people were recommending.
Awesome. Awesome. Not the advice, but awesome the way you you are incorporating the advice, especially specifically the point before that you shared. And now resources. Favorite book?
Yeah, so this is, I'm not sure if this is going to be very helpful, but for me, one of my favorite books is Stephen Hawking's The Grand Design. And, it's essentially for me, the paradigm shift of understanding that everything I learned about physics in high school was wrong. This is something that, of course, is, both me and everybody at Alinea were passionate about, is understanding the underlying truth behind things, and applying actual data, statistics, and to have a sharper understanding of what is really going on, what moves the needle to drive outcomes. And in physics, I was just taught everything wrong, and for me it was sort of mind blowing reading Stephen Hawking and learning that the universe actually operates in a completely different dynamic than what I used to think.
Curious to learn more. Favorite movie or series?
I think one of my favorite ones is The Last Dance. Michael Jordan's docuseries. It's just like a great testament of high performing teams, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's just interesting to see this record breaking individual and his path to get there.
And favorite podcast, excluding this one?
I'll do a plug for Brian Reckworth. Latitudes podcast is pretty great.
we are both on the same page on that, and of course on the previous resources. It's great suggestions that you made here today. Fernando, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your journey so far. It's been a pleasure. You are always invited to come back to share your progress.
Perfect, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. And to our community, as you see, we keep bringing you the best of the best and trying to make your life a little bit easier, mitigating some of the risk and giving you some clarity on the path ahead. See you soon and keep scaling.